Imagine the world's most glamorous star suddenly turning a story of empowerment into a storm of lawsuits, headlines, and unsealed secrets. Everything she said was for women, but what if it was really for herself tonight? We're diving into the unbelievable twist behind Blake Lively's $650 million courtroom showdown, where Hollywood's golden image begins to crack and shocking receipts reveal a truth no one saw coming in a world where every headline competes for attention and every story fights to be the loudest. There stands a glittering image of perfection, one that has now begun to fracture. Blake Lively, once celebrated as Hollywood's golden girl, as the woman who could do no wrong, has found herself in the center of a legal firestorm that has the entire industry whispering and watching in disbelief. It all began with a film that was supposed to empower women, that was supposed to shed light on the darkness of domestic struggles. Instead, it became a mirror reflecting the uncomfortable truth about fame, power, and the illusion of purpose. This was not just another movie. This was supposed to be a statement, a story about survival, about breaking cycles. But behind the camera, a very different story was unfolding, and now the world is starting to see it for what it really was. Blake Lively said, she took on this project to stand up for women, to make a difference, to give voice to pain that too often gets silenced. But as the documents began to unseal and the messages began to leak, the cracks in that narrative began to grow wider. Because while she claimed this lawsuit was for justice, it seemed to be something very different. She is now demanding $650 million, claiming reputational damage, claiming her businesses were destroyed, her career was shattered, and her image beyond repair. The numbers alone sound unreal, and yet they are there in black and white pages of legal filings, detailing losses that many find impossible to believe. What could possibly have gone so wrong that would lead an actress once adored by millions to believe she deserves a sum that rivals the fortune of movie empires? The answer lies in a tangled web of blame, image control, and the one thing Hollywood values more than talent: perception. But to understand this story, we have to go back to the very root of it, to a book, a controversial bestseller written by Colleen Hoover, a book that long before the cameras started rolling had already ignited outrage across social media. Fans called it tone-deaf. Some said it glorified harm, romanticized suffering, and blurred the line between love and abuse. When Colleen decided to release an adult coloring book based on the story, that outrage exploded. People questioned how anyone could turn a book about trauma into something so trivial. They said it was insensitive, exploitative, and the backlash grew louder by the day. And in the middle of that storm stood Blake Lively, stepping into the leading role of a story that millions already distrusted. The timing could not have been worse. And for Justin Baldoni, the film's director and co-star, it meant navigating a minefield of controversy from day one. The tension was real. The whispers were constant. The film was marketed as a romance, when in truth it was about pain, survival, and the emotional scars left behind by violence. And that confusion created chaos when the press began asking questions about whether the story glorified harm. The answers mattered more than anyone realized. Justin answered carefully, with compassion, acknowledging that there is nothing romantic about pain. He said it was intentional, that the movie was made with care. But his honesty did not sit well with Colleen Hoover, who felt his words painted the story in a way that could hurt her brand. Soon text messages began to surface, revealing that she was upset that he had gone off script, that he had spoken too freely, and from that moment, things began to unravel behind the scenes. There were calls, emails, damage control, and PR statements drafted by hand. Every word measured, every sentence designed to minimize fallout. It was the kind of behind-the-curtain drama that most audiences never see, but in Hollywood, where every move is about image, the smallest misstep can spark a firestorm. And as the days went by, those fires spread fast. Headlines began to pop up everywhere. Justin Baldoni responds to claims that it ends with us. Glorifies domestic violence. Blake Lively faces backlash over silence. The headlines grew louder, and while Justin addressed the questions directly, Blake tried to avoid them. She pivoted the narrative, focusing on style, fashion, and romance angles. That kept the darker topic out of reach. She refused to engage in conversations about the theme of harm and survival, the very theme that defined the book she was promoting. And people noticed, fans saw the difference between her guarded responses and Justin's empathetic tone, and social media began to take sides. Soon, videos began resurfacing, old interviews, moments on set, clips from past projects. And slowly the internet began to draw a picture of Blake Lively that was far from flattering. It was as though every rumor from years past had returned stronger than ever. Old stories about conflicts with co-stars, rumors of being difficult on set, complaints from crew members, whispers of tension during production, they all came back one by one. And it began to feed a new narrative that Blake was the problem, not the victim. This is where everything began to collide, because as Blake claimed that she was being defamed, the evidence used against her were her own words, her own clips, her own recorded moments, things she had said and done long before this lawsuit existed. And now she was saying that these videos were part of a smear campaign. She argued that these old moments were being boosted to destroy her credibility, to make her look unsympathetic and untrustworthy. But those same clips were not fabricated. They were real. And so the question began to rise. How can a person claim defamation when the source material comes from themselves? As this question spread through media outlets, more unsealed documents began to surface. And with them, the shocking list of damages she was demanding. She claimed to have lost $56 million in past wages, $71 million in lost profits, $34 million in reputational harm, and on top of all of that, punitive damages of not less than 3 times the total value. In simple terms, she was asking for an amount that could fund several major film studios. The breakdown itself raised eyebrows. She argued that her beverage company, Betty Buzz, had lost $22 million, her beauty line, Blake Brown Beauty, had lost nearly $50 million, and that her future acting opportunities were worth another $35 million. The numbers were massive. But even more shocking was the fact that these companies were not even part of the lawsuit. They were separate entities not tied to her personal name, meaning she could not legally recover those losses under her own lawsuit. And yet she listed them anyway, and when analysts started to look deeper, they found even more inconsistencies. For example, she claimed lost appearances and speaking engagements totaling millions, even though her career has always been sporadic. She makes few movies. She works by choice, and she continues to sign on to new projects, including a sequel to A Simple Favor and another major production deal already in progress. If her career was ruined, as she claims, then why is she still working? That question became the centerpiece of public debate. She says her image is destroyed, yet magazines name her one of the most influential women of the year. She claims her products are collapsing, yet she continues to launch new flavors, new campaigns, new endorsements. Nothing aligns with the story she is telling, and that is where the public perception began to turn. Even more, people started wondering if this lawsuit was ever about justice at all. Because for someone who claimed to be standing up for women, most of her damages centered not around emotional harm but money losses, profits, and brand reputation. Her legal filings spoke less about trauma and more about valuation charts, projections, and imaginary forecasts that experts say have no basis in reality, and behind all of this, something darker was forming, a theory that maybe this was less about justice and more about leverage, because in Hollywood, reputation is currency, and when that currency drops, some will do anything to inflate it again. As each court filing comes out, it becomes clearer that Blake Lively is not just fighting a legal battle. She is fighting for control of her own narrative. For the first time, her image of effortless perfection is slipping, and beneath it lies something far more complex, a fear that maybe the audience is finally seeing past the glitter and into the truth. But what is that truth? Is she the wronged woman she claims to be? Or is this another Hollywood strategy to turn scandal into sympathy, and sympathy into a payout? As we move deeper into this story, the answers will only get stranger and the stakes even higher, because this is no longer just about a movie or a lawsuit. It is about the fight to rewrite a reputation that may already be gone. Under the glittering lights of Hollywood, where every smile hides a strategy and every headline serves a purpose, the story of Blake Lively's $650 million lawsuit began to twist into something few could have predicted, because as the filings stacked higher and the whispers grew louder, the story was no longer about justice or empowerment. It was about calculation, reputation, and survival. This was a battle that went beyond courtrooms. It became a test of what image truly means in a world built on illusion. When the first wave of legal documents became public, analysts were stunned. The list of damages read like a fantasy novel: wages, profits, beauty lines, beverage companies, endorsements, all allegedly destroyed by reputational harm. But nowhere did it clearly tie back to any single provable loss. There were no contracts canceled, no verified offers withdrawn, no direct evidence that her name had been blacklisted. Instead, there were projections, hypothetical, losses, future opportunities that might have happened if everything had gone perfectly. It was as if Blake had written a script for the life she thought she would have lived if this controversy had never occurred. But Hollywood rarely plays out like fantasy, and those watching from the sidelines knew it. The shock spread across social media. Legal experts weighed in, saying that such enormous claims would require equally enormous proof that Blake Lively simply did not seem to have, and yet she doubled down. Her legal team argued that millions of people had seen and shared what they called defamatory material videos, interviews, clips that showed Blake in what she claimed were manipulated or misrepresented ways. But those videos were the same interviews she had given publicly over years, moments when she had spoken in her own words, behaved in her own way, and been captured exactly as she was. There was no fabrication, there was no editing that changed her meaning, and so her argument began to crumble in the court of public opinion. But she continued pressing forward, focusing her case on the idea that her reputation was ruined beyond repair. And yet every week that passed seemed to contradict her own claims. She was appearing at award shows, she was launching new products, she was still being photographed by the biggest magazines and still booked for global campaigns. If this was career destruction, it did not look like it. The more she tried to insist in the end. What began as a fight for redemption turned into a reflection of everything wrong with Hollywood's obsession with image. Blake Lively wanted to prove she was wronged, but in chasing the illusion of control, she revealed how fragile that illusion truly is. Her $650 million claim became a symbol of how power can distort perspective, and how reputation once questioned cannot be repaired through litigation alone. The court of public opinion does not wait for verdicts. It reacts to authenticity. And in this case, authenticity was what audiences felt was missing. Whether she wins or loses in court, the damage has already been done. The glamour has cracked, the myth has faded, and behind it all stands a woman still, trying to convince the world that her story is the only truth worth believing. But Hollywood has moved on. The cameras have turned, and no amount of strategy can rewrite the simple reality that reputation is earned, not owned. And in chasing the price of her name, Blake Lively may have finally discovered its true cost.